the central banks of the other worlds. The man knew the bartender was full of shit. There wasn't an establishment on Celtiboria that wouldn't happily give 3 times the official rate, regardless of local laws and regulations. But he didn't care. The barkeep had to earn his way, and if cheating his customers was the only way he could do it, so be it. He'd have even found it amusing, if he'd had time for anything beyond misery and the temporary relief offered by extreme drunkenness. "It's all right, just keep the change, and keep this will coming until I'm under the stool instead of sitting on it." The man wasn't really drunk, not yet at least. The slurred words were more wishful thinking than real impairment. Getting drunk was a challenge for him, something that took a lot of effort, and one hell of a lot of booze. He grabbed the bottle and filled his glass right to the top. Then he picked it up and drank it down in one slug. It was shit, some kind of bathtub brew that burned like battery acid going down. But right now he'd have guzzled steroid piss if it would dull the pain. Erase the memories, even for a few hours. But that was easier said than done. He wasn't a normal man, born with a random assortment of his parents' traits, with memories of old Aunt Jenny telling him how they had the same eyes. No, his genetics were far more complicated, the product as much of manipulation in a lab as whatever DNA he got from his mother and father, whoever they had been. Many people would have considered his genes a gift. They made him stronger, faster, smarter, more capable than pretty much anyone else he'd ever encountered. But they also made it damned difficult to get drunk, and most of the time that was all he cared about. He realized people would consider him ungrateful for the capabilities he so despised, but he didn't see things that way. He was doing his best to throw away his talents, and he radiated contempt for the things he could achieve if he chose to. Indeed, he was far too aware of just what he could do, the terrible uses to which he'd put his capabilities in the past, and it was that more than anything that made him want to crawl into the bottle. He wanted to be left alone, and usually that's what he got. Most of all, he hated his hypercharged digestive and immune systems, and the efficiency with which they purged poisons like alcohol from his system almost as speedily as he could imbibe them. A group of soldiers walked through the door, their green and black uniforms identifying them as General Ghana's men. Bako Ghana was one of the strongest warlords in the area, and he'd been expected to chase the others out of the Badlands in a single campaign season. But the rival warlord Lucerne had gotten the better of him, beating his forces in the field 3 times and taking West Hill away from him. The truce that followed gave the soldiers of all sides access to the town, as long as they didn't bring anything heavier than sidearms with them. The word was Lucerne didn't like it, but even in victory his forces had been worn down, and he needed time to rest and resupply them. Giving his rival soldiers access to the only place in the Badlands they could get their fill of booze and women didn't seem like too much of a price to pay for the break in the fighting. The new arrivals carried themselves not with the demeanor of an army that had been thrice defeated and chased halfway across the Badlands, but rather a swagger that suggested their side had gotten the better of the fighting, that West Hill was their town, and not just some place they were allowed to come lightly armed to do their drinking and whoring. The man would have quickly seen through the pretense, realized the soldiers were overcompensating, covering for their bruised morale. That is, if he'd noticed them at all. Which he didn't. Apathy had become his religion, and he was deep in prayer, with no interest in anything save the bottle in front of him. "Barkeep, 4 whiskeys, and be quick about it." The soldier's voice was coarse. He and his comrade sat down at the bar, the speaker at the end of the group right next to the man. The 4 of them were puffing on foul-smelling cigars, cheap ones, the man realized, as the noxious smoke wafted in his direction. The soldier next to him reached out and grabbed his drink as the bartender set it down. "Another," he barked, as soon as he'd tossed it back and set the glass down. Then he turned his head and stared at the man. "So what the hell do we have here?" he asked, the disrespect unmistakable in his tone. "Some homeless wanderer in off the scrub?" He paused, his gaze locked on the man. He made a face. "You stink, you know that? You reek like the trail." He paused, turning back and downing the drink the bartender had just poured for him. "You got any script on you? 'Cause one of them fine women